Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. Hi, I'm David Manti with Cannabis Equipment News, and with me today is Josh Malman, VP of Cultivation at Jushi Holdings. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, David.
First, a little bit of housekeeping. If you could please like, subscribe, and share the podcast, it'll really help us out a lot. If you get a chance, please rate and review the podcast on Apple Reviews or give us a positive review on whatever platform you use. All right, getting back at it. Josh, how did you get into cannabis?
Well, I was a little bit lucky and sort of fell into it back in 2010. I have a BS in horticulture from University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I guess we share a Wisconsin connection there.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. I studied international horticulture with really the ultimate goal to study abroad in Israel. I picked Israel kind of for personal reasons, but also professional. Israel being, known for high-tech horticultural equipment and research. And so I spent my junior year in Israel studying with a couple professors on drip irrigation techniques, really looking at, how much water we needed to give to salt intolerant plants in the desert scenario in order to be able to leach out some of that salt from the root zone and really understand how to grow those crops the best. The professor was ultimately providing what they called market gardens to African villages so that they didn't have to go to the river every day to get water. They were building a well about a meter high than their farm. And then we were working on different drip emitters and different water flow rates to determine how much water we needed to push through the root zone for lettuce in particular.
Okay. So when were you in Madison?
So I was in Madison 98 through 2001.
Oh man, you left just as I was getting here.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, could you tell me a little bit about the drip irrigation technique and then when you came, when you moved back from Israel?
Yeah. So, the drip irrigation was really looking at how much flow we needed to provide to each plant to basically leach out the salt inherent in both the root zone and the water from lettuce. And so we were working with different Netafim drip emitters, and basically it was a gravity-fed irrigation system. So again, thinking of the cheapest route to provide water to local farms in Africa was you didn't have electricity, you didn't want to be able to use pumps. So building the well a meter higher than the garden, and then using the right dripper, all they really had to do was fill the well, once a week and turn a nozzle and the water kind of flowed through the garden. So pretty exciting experiment. And he actually ended up taking that project to several villages in Africa and sort of onboarding that down there.
Just on a basic level, that has to be some of the most rewarding work you can ever do.
It was great. I got to work with a few individuals, a few research scientists from Ethiopia. So again, just culturally understanding, some different cultural fits between, Americans, Israelis, and Ethiopians. But also, again, being able to work on a study that ultimately provided irrigation for villages in Africa was very satisfying. Generally a lot of semester abroads are, partying and hanging out, and I actually got to do a little bit of horticultural work in the meantime as well, which was great.
Oh, gotcha. I had that mistaken. I thought that was after you had graduated. I didn't know that was a semester abroad.
Yeah, that was a semester abroad.
Yeah, that is a way different experience than some of the other ones that I've heard. Just like, well, I worked as a barista in Prague and took like 6 credits.
Right.
Yeah, that's so how do you make the leap from lettuce to cannabis?
Yeah, so as college kind of continued going on, I really got into sort of greenhouse production horticulture is my focus. And after college, I moved out to California, really with the ultimate goal of finding a job in the industry. Very little experience and some book knowledge, and that's about it. Knowing California is the mecca for agriculture and horticulture, I figured I'd be able to find a job there, and luckily I did. I landed a job with a company called Nurseryman's Exchange, who was doing potted ornamentals for the grocery markets and for the big box stores. They're located in Half Moon Bay, California. So I lived in San Francisco and commuted down the coast every day and really cut my teeth both in production, growing, and management at that site.
Okay. What inspired the move? Was it just that you wanted to get involved in the industry, or just because Or was it anything personal that got you into the industry?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, again, California, we had some friends from college who had moved out there. So there was definitely some personal reasons to make it out west. But really, again, I figured the best way to kind of get, into the horticultural world was to get to California and really just kind of find the job, and potentially work through several jobs to get to what I wanted. Ultimately landed with, Nurseryman's Exchange, got some really great experience, not only in California, but we were working with breeders in Denmark, in the Netherlands. So I was able to do some trips abroad, visit some really high tech, high functioning, large scale ornamental nurseries out there. And then of course, cannabis has always been in my life since I was a young adult, and California had the cannabis scene going on. So I didn't really know I was going to fall into cannabis at that point. As it turned out, a friend of mine from high school started the clinic, Colorado here in Denver in about 2009. Kind of heard through the grapevine that he was getting things started. It was time for my wife and I to kind of look at a change of venue in terms of where we were living. Wanted to move back to Colorado, where I'm originally from, to be close to family, and so sort of just really good luck, I guess, that I kind of fell into cannabis in 2010.
What was the clinic in 2010?
The clinic was a small mom and pop, basically a retail dispensary store. So they opened their first retail dispensary at the end of 2009. When I came on board at the beginning of 2010, we had a 24 lamp cultivation in Denver. And so coming from about 400,000 square feet of greenhouse operations and a bunch of field to a 24 lamper, quite the change, but it was a good introduction into cannabis. I had done a few one-off grows, at my own house throughout the years, really had never, produced cannabis on a scale. And so, starting at that size and building into it was a really good start for me.
So what did you learn from that first commercial grow that you still kind of hold with you today?
Well, that, cannabis is, although it's a weed and grows very easily, it's not very hardy. It's susceptible to a lot of problems. You definitely need to have, what growers call eyes on the crop and eyes on the facility at all times. And even being just 24 lamps and, I don't know, maybe 100 plants, it took time to manipulate the growth of the plant, took a lot of manual manipulation of the environmental conditions, coming from fully automated greenhouses to a warehouse that had, a thermostat and, a roll-in humidifier, dehumidifier, lots of different dials to turn to really manage that environmental conditions to create the best growing conditions for the crop.
Do you remember the size of your first harvest there?
In pounds,
Yeah. Or plants?
it was probably in the, 50 to 100 pounds. It was
Okay.
pretty small. Yeah.
Okay. So now tell me about the how you wound up at Jushi Holdings.
So I worked with the clinic for about 10 years, helped them grow into 3 cultivation facilities here in Colorado. We eventually opened up 6 retail stores. We did some consulting. We worked with partners like GTI and others around the country to help build and design some of their original facilities. And in 2019, Jushi bought the consulting firm from the clinic, which was basically a holding place for myself and a few other higher level managers within the clinic, as well as some of our IP.
Okay. I mean, that has to be, was that both difficult and really cool to have to like sort of leave a decade's worth of work, but also be like one of the few pieces they wanted to pull out of that operation?
Yeah, it was definitely a little sad, having to leave the clinic. We did a lot of great work there. We are, instrumental in helping the state and the local regulators write rules and create edits to these regulations throughout the years. I sat on work groups with the Department of Agriculture around pesticide usage. I worked on some other work groups around, energy efficiencies within cultivation centers. And so leaving some of that behind was a little tough, but really what I saw the opportunity was to move to a larger company that was going to be well funded, and we were going to be able to take what we learned in those first 10 years and really try to bring that to scale, nationwide.
When was that acquisition? So if you started I mean, was that last year?
That was 2019.
2019. Okay. So ever since the move, what have you been up to with Jushi?
Well, it just seems like we're getting busier and busier. I remember, when we kind of joined Jushi, that my boss came to me and said, Josh, unfortunately, Jushi doesn't really have a lot of cultivation in their portfolio right now. But don't you worry, we're gonna get that to them. We're gonna talk about vertical integration in each of these states, and we'll find some work for you. And I said, okay, that's fine. And in that first year, we did a lot of work with some hemp farms up in New York, and we were really looking at sort of the hemp and CBD world. As it turns out, we really didn't go much further than dipping our toe in the water. But now we've got operating facilities in 3 states: Nevada, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And all 3 of those states are going under expansion projects this year. And now all I hear from the top of Jushi is more cultivation, more cultivation, more cultivation. So it's getting really exciting and challenging at the same time to be able to not only operate the facilities that are in operations currently, but then how to design around those facilities and bring on more space without too many interruptions with our existing operations.
Right. So how do you do that?
It's a challenge. It's the most complicated puzzle that I've ever put together. But luckily, working with not only a good architectural and design firm that we brought on board, but also all the knowledge from other functional leaders within the company. So from our construction team, our processing and manufacturing teams, it's a lot of legwork. It's a lot of design work, and we're trying to get it right up front. I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen is having to recreate this facility in multiple states. It's being unable to transfer our product across state lines. It creates a challenge in really trying to build these programs and build these facilities cookie cutter the same way in every state. And ultimately, we're not quite there yet. We've got an existing facility in Nevada that we're retrofitting, an existing facility in Pennsylvania that we're retrofitting and adding on to, and a ground up brand new facility in Virginia. So taking all of our knowledge and the best of the best and trying to bring that to new designs as we go forward.
I'm kind of curious because you talk about having that eyes on the crop mentality. When you're operating, in 3 different states that are all currently under construction, how do you manage that? As running a cultivation operation.
I've been on the plane a lot this last
Yeah.
year, even through COVID,
Yeah.
doing a lot of site visits, really honing in on hiring the right management and the right leadership in the cultivation department, specifically in these facilities, helps to take a little bit of the pressure off, because I have trusted individuals that understand our program, understand our operations and our processes, and can help manage through that. Gives me a little bit more time to spend on the design function. But it's absolutely a challenge, trying to utilize as much of the cloud-based data collection systems around temperature and humidity set points to be able to at least have a quick view to what's happening at these facilities. And then obviously, being in a very heavily regulated industry, we've got cameras all over all of our facilities. So I do have some ability to kind of take a quick peek at the facility, jump around the rooms. Doesn't really tell you the whole story, but you can kind of see a little bit, and it will call out any major issues where you can then reach out to your local teams and work on solutions.
What are things that you can't see with the camera that you would notice right away when you're in the room?
It's really hard to see on the camera true like plant health, right?
Hmm.
And so although you pop up your camera and from 30,000 feet, it looks like all the plants are green and healthy. You can't see if you've got drippers down, so you can't see small signs of wilt. You can't see any sort of pest infestations, although we've seen different lighting companies and different technologies coming out with, pest identification systems and things like that. We don't have any of those, implemented right now, but really, you can kind of see, are your lights on? And then you can kind of overlay some of your environmental data that we're getting from different systems to kind of make sure at least that, when the lights are on, your environmental conditions are matching your set points. But that's about it. I mean, it's really hard to diagnose anything else beyond that.
Do you have any difficulty with staffing or any sort of skills shortage? Or is it, I've heard a lot that there are so many people looking to get into the industry, but not necessarily so many that are qualified for the positions they're seeking. Are you running into that at all?
Yeah, we are. I mean, I think, I think that low level, entry level worker, there's lots of availability. Although the challenge is that each state has its own sort of regulations around, the skill set and the amount of either schooling or knowledge or experience within the industry to get a job in those states. And so it has been a challenge hiring up. And I think what we've been doing is trying to go back to our Rolodex of contacts from our past, from Colorado, from the past 10 years, and trying to bring in, the highest quality individuals we can, at least at those leadership levels, to manage and run the program. And then it's really about training, SOPs, and really trying to bring up the green individuals as fast as we can.
Okay. Well, being cannabis equipment news, I want to talk a little bit about the equipment and technology that you guys are using that's really working for you. What's some of the more interesting stuff, you know, in terms of equipment, monitoring equipment, and techniques that you find particularly interesting and powerful?
Yeah, I mean, right now we are 100% indoor growers, and although I have personal feelings around the future of cannabis cultivation moving towards greenhouses and outdoor, and there's going to be specific uses for product coming out of each of those different methods. Um, we have made really a wholesale change to go vertical at Jushi. So moving away from single level rolling benching with double ended HPS to vertical carriages, LED lighting, air movement within each rack to make sure that we're destratifying the environment around the crop itself. And that's been the biggest change. It's something that we did a little bit of research and in R&D with in Colorado, but never at the scale that we're doing now, where it's room after room after room of double and triple tiered cultivation. It's taken a lot of learning, and we've had some missteps throughout that process. But I see that, at least in terms of indoor cultivation, really the future. And again, trying to minimize our carbon footprint as much as possible, knowing that these facilities are very electrical intensive, in terms of lighting and HVAC
Hmm.
equipment.
Yeah, I mean, did you see the study that just came out like the other day about how their indoor grow operations are actually a big source of greenhouse?
I just saw the article, I think today on MMJ Daily or one of those.
Yeah, right on. So what were some of those missteps that you guys went through as you guys were kind of working through going vertical?
I think the first is really just trying to get the environmental conditions in the room correct, right? And so it's not just, dumping air at the top and having your returns at the bottom and sucking it out. What we've really learned is that you need that air moving across the canopy at each level. And so working with companies like VAS to move air from the mechanical system across the canopy to destratify some of that environment. We're growing with about from bench to the bottom of the light, about 4 to 5 feet, and so the plants can get up into those lights rather quickly, and those environmental conditions at the plant level change very rapidly. So the mechanical engineering, and the design of those systems has changed over the last couple of years. I think another one that really stands out is the amount of aisle space that you need in these rooms. And so, my biggest holdback on going vertical sooner was, how do I get people and plants up and down these tiers safely and efficiently, right? It's
Hmm.
not like you can just push your bench across and you're working at plants at arm level, at waist level. You need ladders, you need lifts, you need all kinds of different techniques to do that. And so at first I was very greedy with my canopy space and wanted as little rolling aisle space as possible. And over time, I'm pulling back from that thought process a little bit and saying, I'll give up a little bit of canopy space to have the best ergonomics and the ability to use automated equipment like lifts or rolling ladders or something like that, to be able to get my people and my plants up and down those levels.
Okay, and uh, that's the equipment that you're using that's working for you, like rolling ladders. Are you using any of the like sort of space saver equipment where you can kind of like almost uh file your the vertical growth, or are they stationary?
Nope, they are rolling. So they're
Oh,
like a library stack. So we basically have one rolling aisle that changes depending on the position of your carriages. Correct.
Okay. So what is, you talked about that first harvest being around like 50 pounds. How often are you harvesting now, and what's an average yield?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're harvesting weekly at all of our facilities if the space allows. So the facility in Nevada just has two small cultivation rooms. Our perpetual cycle there is one harvest a month, and we just turn each room once a month. As we get into the larger facilities, it becomes a weekly harvest. Right now we're at about 60 to 65 grams a square foot across all of our facilities. And so we're talking about, yields of it really depends on the room size. I think that's probably the metric that will stay there. I mean, we have harvests of, anywhere from 200 pounds in a harvest in Nevada, upwards of 800, 1,000 pounds in some of our larger facilities right now.
Just because I'm a little unfamiliar with it, what is the changeover like after a harvest in a grow room?
It's cleaning and sanitation. That's
Yeah.
really the top two deals. I mean, you want to go in and get any of the organic material out. And so that's dead leaves that have fallen off. We're growing in 6-inch cocoa cubes. And so we got to pull out all the planting medium. We need to wash down all of the racks, the walls, the floor, and then we need to come back in and sanitize those surfaces prior to reloading. It's a 2 to 5 day job, depending on the size of the room and how many levels of racking we have.
Okay. How large of a staff do you manage?
Right now, across all three sites, we're at about 50, but that will go 4x by the end of the year as we get our expansion
Wow.
on.
Oh my goodness. What are some of the what is some of the automated equipment? You talked a little bit about lighting and about the like library stack. What are some of the other technologies that you sort of couldn't live without right now?
I mean, I think what we're really finding is that the processing of all this biomass is becoming harder and harder in the techniques that we're used to over the last 10 years, which were, a lot of growers are hang drying whole plants and then, shucking the buds off the plant after drying and either hand trimming or using, dry trimmers. There's a lot of groups out there across the country that are using wet trimming techniques. I mean, I think what we're really coming to bear is that we don't have enough staff or hours in the day to manually process this much product. And so really looking at equipment that can handle a lot of that process during the wet stage of it, looking at sort of standalone drying containers as opposed to trying to build out a large room and add the mechanical needs to dry that product. And again, with the sort of perpetual fashion is you need to be able to basically take each week's harvest and sort of isolate it, because the next week that the harvest comes in, you don't really want to combine those two groups together. You have something that's 5 to 7 days in its drying period, and then you're bringing in all this wet product. Those don't mesh very well. So really, here at Jushi, we've kind of separated those two processes. So luckily, cultivation sort of gets the crop, high quality, high yielding to the processing team. And then it's up to processing to kind of handle it from there. And so, although I know a lot of the equipment that we're selecting on that end, it's not necessarily under my full purview, but we're looking at units like auto cures. Conviron has some sort of standalone dry cure sort of rooms that they're building. And then really looking at sort of the wet buck, wet trim process to start that. Coming out of the dry rooms, looking at, a way to then just take that product and get it directly into packaging through automated means as well.
But I mean, after all that work that you've put in from the cultivation side, it's got to be hard to like just hand it over to processing and be like, I trust you.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, I hear that from my boss every day is, you're not just going to leave it at the door and walk away. You really need to see that process all the way through. And so the cultivation team works very closely with processing. I mean, really the processing team sort of is just an offshoot of cultivation. And so that grower is involved in training around what to look for when the buds are being processed, either for filth or for bugs or for any other issue that we might be seeing, disease. But really it is up to that team to handle it. And so a lot of cross training happens between each department. And we've, one of the head of processing came from the clinic as well. And so again, we've worked together very closely for the last 10 years. We kind of have the same mindset here, and we're training our staffs in the same manner so that both groups understand the cultivation process and the processing process.
Have you ever, or could you share an example of when you've lost a grow due to pests or mold or some other situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think in Colorado, the powdery mildew pressure was extreme. And I don't know if that had something to do with, sort of a shared genetics pool that was going around the state, that we were all using sort of a lot of the same phenos, a lot of the same varieties. I think, primarily it was that these buildings in Colorado, when we started, were engineered and designed poorly, right? We kind of started with this 24 lamper, which I just throw a 10-ton rooftop on the ceiling and we're good to go, right? And it's evolved a lot since then. But really early on, our level of control of the environment in these rooms was not as good as it is now, and not as good as it needed to be. I think there was this chemical treatment crutch early on before the Department of Ag got involved to really say none of these really hardcore horticulture and agricultural chemicals can be used, that the growers just didn't know what else to do. They kind of had it in their mind that I've got this small toolbox of chemicals I can use to fight these problems. Once those were taken away, growers were kind of throwing their hands in the air saying, now what? What do I do? I've got an under-designed facility. And so, yeah, we've lost rooms to powdery for sure. Luckily, our facility in Colorado was backed by a hydrocarbon manufacturing facility. And so we didn't necessarily lose all the product. We were able to sort of salvage some of that into manufactured goods. But we know that flower is always in short demand, especially in new markets. And so when you lose a room of flower, it hurts. Even though you can recoup some of that in a manufactured product, you really lose that product that's in high demand on the market.
What was the cloud-based software that you used to sort of manage the 3 different operations?
So I don't have one that's necessarily managing it. I mean, we're actually using some pretty simple technology like sensor push sensors that are Wi-Fi and Bluetooth enabled. And so, something where I can pull up on my computer or on my phone and I can see actual conditions within those rooms. I can see graphs over daily, weekly, and monthly periods. So again, nothing super high tech and nothing that I'm specifically controlling, but more that just gives me insight into those conditions. And one more set of eyes on those conditions where if I see something that jumps out as being off, it's a phone call away to my cultivation leads at these facilities. They go in and dial the knobs to get those corrected.
See, that's one thing I hear a lot about in traditional manufacturing is that, people essentially strive to like 24/7 lights out manufacturing where it's going to be completely automated in the future. I mean, in your opinion, is that even possible in the cannabis industry?
It seems unlikely, although, in my past career in ornamentals, I definitely walked into, multiple 100 square foot, 1,000 greenhouses that you see one person sort of walking around and there's robots going out and picking up trays of plants and bringing it back to the packing house. And then it gets taken off by robots. There's visual aids, visual robots that are looking at the quality and determining if it goes into packaging for your highest cost customer or your lowest cost customer. I could see some of those being implemented in cannabis. Cannabis seems like it needs a lot of touches, right? We're constantly wanting to defoliate and bottom strip and scrog and do all these different techniques to continue to push this crop as hard as we can. That I don't necessarily see all of that being taken away, but we are definitely thriving and trying as much as we can to put in automation where it fits, especially around testing, right? We're in a highly regulated testing market around total yeast and molds and other variables. And so we're finding that people are the dirty part of that process. And so being able to strip the people out of some of those processes is probably the best for the end user, ultimately.
Okay. I mean, can't they just wash their hands?
Yeah, we do a lot of washing of hands. We do a lot of changes of gloves. We do a lot of sanitation of our facility and our equipment. But at the end of the day, we're not We don't have people following around our employees, every minute of their work hour. It's very easy for an employee to be at their trim station and, reach down and grab their phone. If we don't have phones in our rooms, we're kind of cutting those out as well, but reach down and touch the floor for some reason, or touch their shoe. And then without even thinking, they're back on the crop. And, just one of those instances can cause a fail. And with the volume that we're putting through and the amount of testing that we're doing, those fails add up and they start stripping away from your profitability pretty quickly.
No, I don't mean to joke about it, but it's I've heard about it with other people where you just can't it's hard to accommodate for the human error factor, so to speak, and how that impacts the business.
Yeah, when I started, I was bringing the mentality of this is agriculture, this is horticulture. It's a dirty business, right? And that got stripped away pretty quickly in those first few years. And now as we're looking at, regulations that are getting tighter and tighter, and then also the future ability to export either to Europe, or eventually if the US goes legal and we're able to export to other states, we're really looking at GACP and GMP regulations. I mean, we're trying to operate these facilities like a food manufacturing facility. And those are the regulations that we're under, and we're striving to create our facilities to sort of, even before those regulations come down, sort of live within those rules right now.
What are your toughest cultivation challenges, and how do those differ in the different the very different climates that you operate facilities in?
Yeah, I think you nailed it right there, Dave. That's really the biggest challenge, is how do we build and operate the facility the same in every different state, especially with facilities that are existing that we're retrofitting. And so it really comes down to a lot of design work. It really comes down to equipment selection and making sure that we're trying to engineer and outfit these facilities with the same equipment, so that the cultivation leads at each of these sites is playing with the same tools as their partner in a different state. It's been a challenge up to this point, but we're getting closer and closer where we have very specific needs in each of our cultivation rooms, and our engineers and designers are being able to put a template together so that as we build out, as we expand, we don't have to come back to the drawing board every time. We're going to have this template that hopefully we can start just dropping into each of these states. But that is the biggest challenge right now, is 3 facilities across the country, different types of facilities and different climates. And you have to have the skill level and the knowledge at the local level to be able to manipulate their equipment in the ways that they need to try to stay within our ideal set points.
Talking about an ideal set point, if you had it your way, would you rather not be retrofitting another building and just kind of starting from scratch?
Yeah, absolutely. We've gone through quite the headache in one of our newer facilities. Well, not newer, but one of the facilities that we've just taken on last year up in Pennsylvania. That, again, as you walk through the facility, you see a lot of opportunities, a lot of things that you can do very quickly with a low CapEx to improve the facility. But over the last several months, we've understood that some of the underlying issues that we have in that facility didn't really show themselves during our sort of due diligence process. And so, I think going forward, having a new facility, having it engineered and designed properly will give us the best opportunity for success.
Are the retrofits as a result of acquisition? Is that how you
Correct.
got them into the
Yeah.
Yeah. So what were some of those underlying issues that you maybe didn't see during the first walkthrough?
I think it's things like grow rooms that don't have walls that go to the deck, the way that the air within the facility is circulated, things that, again, in these acquisition processes that are moving very quickly, you don't necessarily have all the time to get the right individuals in there to really give a deep look at these facilities. And so as you get operating, all of a sudden, some of those little shortcomings start to rise to the top, where you're not able, the rooms aren't positively pressured. There's dirty air from one room circulating into another room. And some of those, it's really mechanical engineering, I think, is honestly the biggest challenge that I've come up with in cannabis cultivation, that we haven't hit it yet. We're close, but it really seems, and I've visited several other cultivations from other companies across the country. And the first thing you see when you go into there is that they're already tweaking their system. No matter if it's brand new and they're in their first cycle, they're already making changes to what the engineers have put in, because it's not right yet. We're getting closer, but we're not there.
In your opinion, what does the future of cannabis cultivation look like, both near and long term?
Yeah, I mean, I made reference to greenhouse cultivation. I really see this indoor cultivation as a something that we're sort of been forced into in the early parts of this industry as it's been spreading across the country, because people don't want to see cannabis growing outdoors. People don't want to see cannabis growing in greenhouses. It smells a lot. There's the whole odor control. But ultimately, if we're going to do this in a more environmentally conscious way, we got to get out from the indoor situation. So I really see, greenhouse cultivation as being the future. And we are actually, designing a greenhouse facility in Europe right now, which will be hopefully Jushi's first greenhouse operation, and hopefully show that we can do that well and produce high quality cannabis within a greenhouse and be able to start to spread that across our portfolio.
What are your expectations for other areas of the U.S. As potential, you know, uh, grow operations for Jushi going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the segmentation of each state's regulations has really made it harder on the multi-state operators to be profitable and successful. I mean, like I said, it's really hard to redesign and build these facilities state by state. I think ultimately, if legalization happens across the U.S., that gives the company a much better chance to select a site that'll be perfect for them forever, and then build at that site, get enough space where you can continue to expand as needed there, but not have to deal with different climates across the country, which really, creates a challenge for us.
What are your predictions on federal legalization? Is it going to happen in the next 4 years?
I'm not a legal pundit. I do think it's moving very quickly, as we've seen more and more states are coming online, both medically and recreationally. Virginia just moving to legalization with their state legislature, I think is a very good sign. And so I think as more states do that, I think the feds are going to have to, jump in and get involved and create a standardized legalization and regulations across the country. So yeah, I'm hopeful that it will happen in the next 4 years.
And how about Wisconsin?
Wisconsin. I told my father-in-law, start buying up all that warehouse space in Racine or in Milwaukee, because it's going to be valued a lot higher in a couple of years than it is now. Their hemp program is growing. I know that the legislator is it's a tough group out there in terms of the Democratic and Republican split within the state, but definitely hopeful that they'll move forward. They've got Minnesota and Illinois and Ohio and a bunch of other Midwest states, Iowa, that are coming on board. I think they're probably just around the corner here.
Man, that is a really good point. I mean, of all places that there are some vacant industrial properties, it is Milwaukee and Racine, man.
Yeah.
So, you had talked about like robots and some other futuristic technologies, long-term future of cultivation. What are some of your like long-term IoT predictions from like sort of a techie perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that that control of these facilities in the cloud it's already available. There are large scale greenhouse control systems that you can control from your computer in a state and operate in all your other facilities. I don't think very many operators really have those systems up and working yet. So that would be my goal, is to bring in some of these greenhouse equipment suppliers and really start to integrate our systems across the country. I made note of some certain companies using visual aid, using cameras mounted either on the racking or as part of the lighting system in general, to look for nutrient deficiencies, to look for pest issues, to look for disease pressures. I think we'll continue to see those types of technologies increase and hopefully implemented across the country.
When you are overseeing a cultivation operation the size that you are, do you miss sort of a smaller craft size grow?
I do. And, I think in my opinion that I think that this is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then that craft grow will probably break back out, and there will be a demand for low cost flower and low cost manufactured goods for the mainstream user. And then there's going to be, just like we see in beer and in spirits, there's going to be, a percentage of the population that wants locally sourced, small batch, higher end product. And I think that's where that craft grow will eventually sort of break itself out from the large scale, manufacturing and processing that we're doing right now.
How do you test new technologies? Do you have like a separate R&D facility?
I don't. And right now, I'm sort of at a standstill on R&D because it really is all about production. And I've got, I did a lot of R&D with the clinic. I worked with 7 or 8 different LED, vendors and manufacturers, and really tried to select the ones that I thought were the future, the ones that were going to do the best for me and offer the best platform. But it's hard to work in that R&D in a production situation. And so I think as we build out, as we add more expansion, we will be adding sort of an R&D, not necessarily a standalone facility, but at least space designated to R&D so that we can continue working on lighting selection, engineering designs, and those other, functions that we will eventually want to onboard into our production warehouses.
So when you're looking to get new equipment into these facilities, do you run into problems with available inventory? Do you sort of have like your list of approved manufacturers and suppliers and you stick to that?
Yeah, more or less we do. I think with the design process having to start so early ahead of actually construction and implementation, we can get out ahead of it. We can work with our vendors so that they see a 6-month and 12-month sort of look forward plan for us. And not that they're necessarily manufacturing equipment specifically for us, but we can work out supply issues with them early on. And if we need to potentially make purchases earlier, if they were at a high point in their production and get some, grab some of that inventory and bring it in-house prior to us sort of, starting operations.
Okay. And I know that we're getting a little long here, but I wanted to ask you, I mean, you said you've been on a plane a lot in the last 2 years. What has it been like to go through such rapid growth during a pandemic?
It's been a real challenge. We've had, luckily we've had very few of our employees get very sick. We've had a lot of COVID scares. We've had a lot of employees who have gotten COVID. It's created a scheduling challenge for our staff and for our local staff. We're working multiple groups now and splitting those teams up over the course of a 7-day week, where half of the team comes in for 3.5 days and half the team comes in for the other part of the week, really as a risk mitigation tool, so that if one of the teams does someone gets sick and they're out for a set amount of time, we can potentially lean on our other team to come in and keep the wheels turning there. But yeah, it's been a challenge. We've seen a lot of delays on supplies, not only large equipment, but also just day-to-day usage of equipment, say gloves and masks and cleaning solutions. Right when the pandemic hit, we went on a buying surge and really just started buying up as much of that PPE as we could so we would have it. But yeah, it has created a challenge. Luckily, we've kept the doors open. We've had some dispensaries that were down for a very short amount of time, but luckily the dispensaries are more or less have been, essential businesses in most of our locales. And so they've stayed open. And really our goal is, how do we keep our employees and our patients safe through this, but at the same time, keeping those doors open.
So you had mentioned Europe. What's next for you and Jushi?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're really, like I mentioned, we have expansion projects happening at our 3 current sites in Nevada, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. We've got a European team that's working on a facility in Portugal. We've got a pre-license situation down in Portugal right now. So we're working on the designs, and we're hoping to sort of have that shovel in the dirt sometime this spring. I think that'll be our first foray into Europe, and really watching as Europe grows. Right now, the majority of the European market is in Germany So Germany is our target. Everyone's exporting exporting to Germany right now. But we're very hopeful that, France and the UK and some of these other larger countries, Spain, come on in a way that really opens up Europe. And if that happens, we see a real opportunity to play in that country and in that continent.
Okay. Well, is there anything else that we might have left out, or anything in particular that we might have missed?
I think we've had a really good conversation. We've hit on a lot of the equipment that we're using, a lot of techniques that we're using. And yeah, I really just appreciate your time today, David.
Yeah, no, I thank you so much for taking the time too. It's been really enlightening in terms of some of the stuff that you're using. I've been able to talk to a lot of some of the smaller operations, and it's great to just talk to somebody at your scale and how you guys are actually making it work.
Yeah, great. Well, I urge you to come visit us at one of our sites here in the near future.
Oh man, I would love that. We could do this in person, and I know the video guys are definitely in agreement.
Yeah, excellent.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Great. Thanks, David.
For everybody listening or watching, if you could please give us a like, share, or just give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts, we'd really appreciate it. For Cannabis Equipment News, I'm David Manti. This has been the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. It does sound redundant when you say it that way. Either way. Thank you for listening to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.